Oh, Canada. And oh no, Canada. We all love the classic Canadian stereotype. Super nice, polite to a fault, always saying sorry, even when you bump into them. But if you ever find yourself on a battlefield with one, you better run. Fast. Because the second war breaks out, that maple syrup sweet demeanor flips into full-blown rage mode. Let's take a look at how Canadians have acted when the going got tough. World War I trench raids were already terrifying. Sneaky, chaotic, up-close and personal combat. But Canadian trench raids? Straight-up horror movie stuff. As soon as the Canucks hit the Western Front, they started building a reputation as the terrifying ghost stories enemy soldiers told each other at night. They'd blacken their faces, slip on thick rubber gloves, and arm themselves like medieval assassins. Spike clubs, trench knives, brass knuckles, all designed for quiet, up-close dispatching. But if subtlety wasn't the vibe, they'd break out the pipe bombs and grenade launchers and go full action movie. The results? Terrifying. They blitzed through enemy trenches with such speed and ruthless efficiency that they could end up nearly a kilometer behind enemy lines. German troops, panicked and bewildered, gave them nicknames like Stormtroopers and Wild Colonials, which is honestly metal as hell. In just 4 months leading up to the legendary Battle of Vimy Ridge, the Canadians pulled off 55 of these raids. One of the biggest went down in March 1917 with 1,300 Canadian troops. It was a disaster, 43% casualties and tons of poison gas. But even under that hellstorm, they still managed to clear 450 meters of German trench, hardcore. Turns out, when they weren't silently creeping through trenches like maple-scented wraiths, some Canadians didn't have a whole lot of patience for prisoners. There are some disturbing accounts from World War I where Canadian soldiers were flat out told, "Don't take prisoners, they'll just eat your food." That wasn't just an offhand remark. Some commanders straight up encouraged this "leave no survivors" attitude. One Canadian officer recalled watching his men wipe out a German machine gun crew that had just mowed down half their squad, even as the surviving Germans were crying and surrendering. Too late. The Canadians were in berserker mode. Another soldier described a German trying to surrender mid-bayonet charge, hands up, begging for mercy, and the Canadian soldier just kept going, like a slasher villain in a uniform. Oh, and if you did survive surrendering to a Canadian, you still weren't safe. One particularly grim story tells of a POW getting a live grenade casually dropped into his coat pocket. Spoiler, he did not survive. Early in World War I, there was this unofficial soldiers' pact called Live and Let Live. Basically, we won't shoot if you don't shoot. It even gave us the famous 1914 Christmas truce, where enemies hung out, swapped gifts, and sang carols like it was a weirdly wholesome episode of Band of Brothers. But then the Canadians showed up in 1915, and let's just say the party was over. During Christmas that year, some German soldiers cheerfully shouted holiday greetings across no man's land. A few friendly Canadians waved back. Things were looking peaceful until a Canadian sergeant popped up and mowed down 2 Germans with a machine gun. Merry Christmas, you filthy animal. Another time, they tossed tins of corned beef into a German trench, an act of kindness? Nah. Once the Germans asked for more, the Canadians lobbed grenades instead. Gotcha. What turned these stereotypical sweethearts into trench-terrorizing maniacs? Historians aren't totally sure, but a few theories exist. Some say it was battlefield trauma, like the gruesome rumor of a crucified Canadian nailed to a barn door by German troops. Others blame the trauma of the Second Battle of Ypres in 1915, where the Canadians got absolutely wrecked by Germany's first major poison gas attack. But maybe the real reason is simple. They were always in the first wave. Always the cannon fodder. Always the first ones over the top. And that kind of treatment tends to rewire a person. By World War II, Canada's reputation as terrifying trench warriors had stuck. When June 6, 1944, D-Day rolled around, they were no longer the underdogs. They were elite. Their target, Juno Beach. Objective, punch through German defenses, take Caen and Bayeux, and remind the Nazis why picking fights with angry Canadians is a bad idea. In the first wave alone, 3,000 Canadians stormed the beaches under heavy fire. They took losses, but powered through like tanks. Speaking of which, tanks literally rolled in behind them and crushed German beach defenses. Within 2 hours, the Canucks had carved out their first route off the beach. By nightfall, they'd taken multiple towns and reached their final objective, something no other Allied unit managed that day. But wait, there's more. Some Canadians went even harder, joining forces with the Americans to form the 1st Special Service Force, a top-secret unit known as the Devil's Brigade. Nicknamed the Black Devils by terrified Germans, these guys were the wilderness badasses of legend. Skiers, trappers, lumberjacks, game wardens. Basically, if you could survive in the middle of nowhere and shoot straight, you were in. Their training was brutal. 100-mile marches, weapons drills, hand-to-hand combat, explosives, the works. And after every mission, they'd leave behind calling cards on enemy bodies that read, "The worst is yet to come." Yikes. One of their most epic missions was the assault on Monte la Defensa in Italy, a fortress-like mountain that had chewed up Allied forces for weeks. In December 1943, under cover of fog and snow, 600 of these face-painted maniacs climbed the sheer cliffs in the dead of night, silently took out sentries, and then, when the fighting started, stormed the summit, took it in just a couple hours. Game over. The Black Devils had arrived. So yeah, Canadians can be incredibly nice, but put them in a war, you get stealthy, face-painted trench reapers, grenade-throwing tricksters, and commandos who climb mountains in the dark just to make sure the enemy wakes up in hell. Lesson of the day? Be polite to Canadians. Not because they'll get mad, but because if they do, you won't see it coming, and you might not live to tell the tale.